In today's special update episode, we will be looking back at two cases previously featured for which new information or developments have occurred all inside of the past month. First, we turn our attention towards Ilva Hagner, a 42-year-old software marketing manager who mysteriously vanished from Belmont, California in October of 1996. While her case has been stagnant for more than a decade, new developments may suggest that it's preparing to heat back up. Then, we'll look at one of the most heartbreaking and infamous disappearances in Chicago history, that of 10-year-old Tionda Bradley and her 3-year-old sister Diamond. For more than 20 years, the sister's vanishing has taunted her family. While there have been multiple people who have come forward claiming to have information or even to have been one of the missing girls, just last week, another woman has come forward with her belief that she may be Diamond Bradley. This is Trace Evidence, episode 222, Case Updates, Ilva Hagner and Diamond Bradley. Welcome to Trace Evidence. I'm your host, Stephen Pacheco. In today's episode, we'll be examining updates in two cases previously featured on Trace Evidence. Before getting into those updates, just a few quick notes about the show. Trace Evidence is a weekly true crime podcast focused on unsolved murders and disappearances. Visit trace-evidence.com for all social media links, episode breakdowns, donation options, and contact information. You can submit case suggestions through the website or by emailing me directly at traceevidencepod@gmail.com. As a final note, this year, CrimeCon will be taking place in Orlando, Florida from September 22nd through the 24th. I'll be there representing Trace Evidence on Podcast Row, and I hope to see you too. Visit crimecon.com and use promo code TRACE to save 10% on your pass. That's crimecon.com, promo code TRACE. In October of 1996, 42-year-old Ilva Hagner was seen leaving her job for the last time. Nearly 30 years later, and the truth around her disappearance remains obscured. We begin with Trace Evidence episode 179, The Disappearance of Ylva Hagner. Ilva Annika Hagner was born on Wednesday, August 4th, 1954 in Stockholm, Sweden. Ilva's father, Stig, was a professor with the Swedish University of Agricultural Science, and his interest in nature clearly carried over to Ilva, who developed a love of the wilderness from a young age. The youngster frequently accompanied her father while he was working, and together the two helped sharpen and hone her love of nature. In 1980, Ilva was 26 years old and living in Germany when she met and fell in love with an American citizen in the country on a temporary visa. When it came time for this man to return to the States, he asked Ilva to come with him, explaining that if she did, they could get married. Ilva didn't need a lot of time to think it over, and she agreed, emigrating to the States later that year. 3 years later, in 1983, the couple were married and moved into an apartment along Chicago's East Hyde Park Boulevard. In 1986, they decided to head west, leaving Chicago behind and moving to California, where they settled in the Santa Barbara area. Unfortunately, issues between the couple were only worsened by the dramatic change of scenery, and a few years later, in 1990, they separated and were divorced. Following the dissolution of the marriage, Ilva traveled further north, heading to the Bay Area, where she rented an apartment in Mountain View, a city in southern Santa Clara County. She then enrolled in Santa Clara University and majored in marketing. She'd later open her own company, Hagner Marketing, and while she saw some early success, the company would go bankrupt in 1995. It was not a complete loss for the 40-year-old, however, as she fell deeply in love with the Bay Area and made a lot of friends and connections. Ilva returned to her love of nature, heading out frequently on long walks, hikes, and camping. She and her friends frequently spent their free time out exploring the beauty of the Bay Area, and eventually she'd find her way to new career opportunities. Many of her friends were working in the then burgeoning area of Silicon Valley, and Ilva followed suit, being hired on to Ixos, a German-American software company. She was given the title of Business Marketing Manager, and given her education and experience, it was a perfect fit for the woman who was held in high regard by both coworkers and employers. Ilva moved to a new place in Palo Alto, which she shared with 2 roommates. The new apartment was just a 20-minute drive from Ixos, then located in Belmont, making her commute much shorter. Shortly after taking on the new job, she began attending Stanford University, where she sought to obtain her master's in liberal arts. Not long after opening this new chapter in her life, Ilva would meet a new man as well. It was the late summer of 1996 when she'd meet Thomas Pressburger, and according to everyone who knew her, the sparks immediately began and she started falling hard. Over a holiday weekend in October, she took Pressburger on a trip with her to Big Sur, a mountainous area in Central California, approximately 2 hours from the busyness of her Palo Alto life. The couple planned to spend the weekend hiking and exploring by day and camping under the stars by night. According to a friend, Ilva later wrote an email discussing the trip in rosy and romantic tones, explaining how she'd spent the whole time so happy that she could do little other than smile and giggle at Tom. In a phone call, Ilva took things a step further, telling another friend that the relationship might be turning serious, admitting out loud for the first time that she was falling in love. Ilva was on top of the world during that weekend trip, but less than 24 hours after returning home, she would mysteriously vanish. Monday, October 14th, 1996 began as a normal day for Ilva. After waking and preparing for the day, she made the short drive north to Ixos Software, which was then housed in a state-owned building located at 1070 6th Avenue. The day appears to have passed without incident, as Ilva replied to multiple emails, made and took several phone calls, and was her normal happy and polite self when interacting with her coworkers. At the time, she may have been a little stressed out as she was simultaneously working and putting together an assignment for her literature class. At approximately 6 p.m., a friend called Ilva's work number and the two spoke for several minutes. The friend invited her out to dinner, and while Ilva said she would have loved to go, she explained that she had too much work to get done, but she'd take a rain check for the next week. At that point, Ilva said she'd like to bring Tom along for dinner so he could finally meet some of her friends. This was the last time these two friends would ever speak. According to phone records, the last call answered on Ilva's phone came in at 8:01 p.m. This call originated from Moffett Airfield, where Pressburger worked as a software research programmer. According to Pressburger, the call lasted approximately 15 minutes and was a discussion between the two about getting together when they were a little less busy, probably later in the week. This was the last time anyone outside of her office would see or speak with Ilva Hagner. At 9:30 p.m., Ilva's boss was preparing to close up for the night when she noticed a light on in the young woman's office. Opening the door, she found Ilva sitting at her desk working. Ilva explained that she had something she wanted to finish before she left, and her boss requested that when she was done, that she remember to turn out the lights and lock the doors. Ilva agreed, and her boss would later tell police that she left moments later. She would confirm that when she left, the only people she knew of in the entire building were Ilva and the cleaning service that worked overnight. No one knows for certain what happened that night, but Ilva never came home. The following day, Tuesday the 15th, was the first time anyone got an indication that something might be wrong. Co-workers arriving that morning noted that Ilva's computer was still powered on and papers were scattered across her desk. This was odd because she was known for being extremely neat and organized. She always turned off her computer and put away everything she was working on before leaving for the night. At the time, no one thought this was reason enough to worry about her, but multiple people would later report it to the police as being extremely out of character. On the morning of Wednesday, the 16th, co-workers at Ixos noted that Ilva's desk was still in the same condition they had found it the previous day, and more worrisome, was the fact that for the second day in a row, Ylva hadn't shown up to work. She missed several business appointments without notice or calls, and all calls to her home went unanswered. Not long before noon, an office administrator at Stanford called her job trying to reach her, but was informed that she hadn't shown up to work. At that time, the administrator notified her boss that she hadn't shown up for school either. After hanging up at 12 p.m., Lori Triple, Ylva's boss, contacted the Palo Alto police to report the 42-year-old missing. Since Ylva's car was also missing, police issued a be-on-the-lookout order describing her vehicle as a black 1992 Honda Civic CX Sport Wagon with the license plate 3BBS966. Next, investigators turned to Ylva's financials, though both her bank and credit card companies showed that there had been no activity since before she disappeared. At that time, police had notices put into the system where, if there was any new activity on the accounts, they would be notified. Finally, without any witnesses who had seen Ylva since the night she vanished, and with no indication of where she could be, police notified the local media, who ran several reports on television and in the papers describing Ylva and her vehicle. Those reports would pay off less than 24 hours later. On Thursday, the 17th, the Belmont police received a call from an employee at the Days Inn Motel on Spring Street, just out of Belmont and across the town line into San Carlos. After reading about Ylva's disappearance in the paper, the employee noticed a vehicle fitting the description of her car had been left abandoned just across from the hotel. Belmont police investigators arrived at the scene shortly after and noted that the car had been left less than half a mile south of the Ixo software building. According to the employee, while he couldn't be 100% certain, he didn't believe the car had been there prior to Thursday morning. According to investigators, upon their arrival, they found the car unlocked and the keys dangling from the ignition. Examination of the vehicle showed there were no engine problems and the gas tank was almost completely filled. There didn't appear to be any signs of a struggle in the car, though investigators did note that Ylva's purse was not located at the time and it hadn't been found at her home either. Unfortunately, the case started to slow down, and investigators found themselves running out of leads to pursue. Multiple searches would be conducted in the area around both her car and Ixo software. At one point, they even brought in bloodhounds in hopes of tracking Ylva's movements after leaving work, but again, it was a fruitless effort. In March of 1997, 6 months after her disappearance, multiple police departments worked together to search a residential area near a nature preserve between Interstate 280 and Skyline Boulevard in the Palo Alto foothills. Searchers brought along bloodhounds, as well as heat-seeking equipment, and conducted the search for 6 hours a day across 4 solid days. It didn't take long for reporters to realize a curious connection. Ylva's new boyfriend, Tom Pressburger, had previously lived in one of the homes that was the target of the search, though when asked, he couldn't think of a reason why they'd be looking there. In the end, no evidence nor trace of Ylva was found, though detectives confirmed they had dug in several areas. At that time, investigators would not comment on whether or not Pressburger was being viewed as a suspect. A website made by one of Ylva's brothers later revealed suspicious information regarding another man in Ylva's life. Prior to the weekend she had spent stargazing with Thomas Pressburger, Ylva received several emails from a university professor who considered himself to be her boyfriend. In these emails, he displays a seething anger towards Ylva. He accuses her of being unfriendly to him, refusing to have sex with him, and of being abusive towards him. He wrote in one email, quote, "I won't forgive you. I have done way too much of that." End quote. He went on to say that he was extremely serious and earlier in the email had warned her against being unfaithful to him. That same week, Ylva confided to a coworker that the professor was pestering her to move in with him. She told her friend that she was upset by his attempts to get complete control over her, and she also stated that the professor had been making harassing phone calls, hanging up when she would answer. This friend warned Ylva that most women who come to harm are attacked by men that they know. And while Ylva said she was not scared, her friend noted she was clearly upset and troubled by the situation. For 6 months prior to her disappearance, Ylva had expressed to coworkers and friends that her relationship with the professor was causing a lot of problems for her. When she saw him only as a friend, he was continually trying to pressure her into having sex. Then, on September 23, 1996, just 3 weeks before her disappearance, Ylva confided to a close friend that the professor was trying to talk her into marrying him. Despite her resistance, the man continued pressuring her, and Ylva said it was making her extremely uncomfortable. However, despite this new information, the case would go cold once again, and little happened with the investigation until recently. Case update. At approximately 10 a.m. on Wednesday, May 10th, authorities arrived at a home in the 3700 block of Farm Hill Boulevard in Redwood City, approximately 10 miles northwest from Palo Alto. While some investigators focused in on the home and its property, others entered the adjacent Stolsaft Park. Both the home and the park were cordoned off by investigators who put up yellow crime scene tape across the home's driveway, while other officers kept people from gaining entry to the park. According to officials from the Belmont Police Department, these 2 searches were being conducted in an effort to obtain evidence and/or possible human remains related to the disappearance of Ilva Hagner. While no one would comment about what had brought investigators to this particular area, it seems apparent that they were driven by some purpose to the properties they have been searching. The media managed to capture photos and video of FBI agents removing paving stones from the yard of the house, and it appeared that a digging operation was underway. Agents were seen carrying multiple shovels, buckets, and other tools into the yard for crime scene technicians to use. Later in the day, agents were seen bringing bags of various sizes out from the yard to an FBI van parked in front of the home, where multiple units of the Belmont Police Department were. The FBI later issued a statement that their involvement in the case was limited to providing forensic support with their evidence response team. Back at the neighboring Stolsaft Park, investigators from several different agencies were involved in controlling the area and searching. From reports made public up to this point, multiple agencies are involved in the search, including the Belmont Police, Redwood City Police, San Mateo County Sheriff's Department, Federal Bureau of Investigation, as well as the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office. Asked for information about the search, Lieutenant Pete Lottie of the Belmont Police told CBS News, quote, "The case has been refocused, and we are conducting an investigation in Redwood City into the whereabouts of Ilva Hagner in hopes of bringing some closure in the case." End quote. Perhaps what makes the new searches all the more intriguing is the owner of the Farm Hill Boulevard property is none other than Thomas Pressburger. According to public records, Pressburger purchased the home in March of 1996, approximately 7 months prior to Ilva's disappearance. Pressburger, who is today employed by NASA in robust software engineering at the NASA Ames Research Center, does not appear to live at the property, which seems to have been rented by the current residents. Johanna Rasmussen, president of the Farm Hill Neighborhood Association, told reporters that the residents currently occupying the house have lived there since around the time of Ilva's disappearance and are not currently members of the neighborhood association. This would not be the first time investigators have appeared to focus in on Pressburger. 5 months after Ilva's disappearance in March of 1997, police had conducted multiple searches along Page Mill Road, utilizing infrared scanners and bloodhounds. The search, which lasted 4 days, did not turn up any solid evidence, but it seems apparent that investigators have never fully turned their focus away from Pressburger. Despite this, authorities did tell the media that they were not yet labeling Pressburger as a suspect in this case. Obviously, this is a new and quickly developing situation. Hopefully, sooner than later, more information will be revealed. Perhaps what or who may have led authorities to begin searching and digging at the Farm Hill Boulevard home and adjacent park. After the initial release of the episode on Ylva, I was connected with one of her brothers, and we exchanged several emails back and forth. I have reached out to him following this breaking news, but I haven't yet heard back. Should I get word from the family or when new information is revealed, I will of course release an additional update. While it's a little too early to get excited, it's difficult to play down the emotions associated with seeing movement on a case which has been at a standstill for more than 20 years. We can only hope that investigators are closing in on locating Ylva and perhaps are making headway towards finally bringing someone to justice for the disappearance of the polite, sweet, kind, and loving woman. In July of 2001, 10-year-old Tionda Bradley and her 3-year-old sister Diamond went missing from their Chicago neighborhood. More than 20 years later, the case remains unsolved, but now someone has come forward claiming to be Diamond. So we turn our attention to episode 55, The Disappearance of Tionda and Diamond Bradley. Tionda Bradley was born on January 20th, 1991 to her mother, Tracy. Born in Chicago, she was raised in her family's apartment, located in the 3500 block of South Lake Park Avenue in Chicago's South Side. When Tionda was 7 years old, on November 25th, 1997, Tracy would give birth to another daughter, whom she'd named Diamond Yvette. For the family, it quickly became apparent that Tionda looked upon Diamond as her responsibility, and the young girl frequently contributed to assisting with care of her new young sister. Diamond was a beautiful young child, playful and free-spirited according to the family. The children were raised in a caring environment, surrounded by strong women with a deep-seated love for them, including Tracy and Sheila Bradley Smith, their great aunt. By the summer of 2001, Tionda was 10 years old and Diamond was 3, with her 4th birthday coming up in November. July was building up to be an exciting month for the family as the girl's sister, Victoria, would be celebrating her 9th birthday on July 7th. Unfortunately, in what can only be described as a bizarre and disturbing unfolding of events, neither Tionda nor Diamond would be there to celebrate with their sister. Instead, just the day prior to that event, both girls would vanish seemingly into thin air, leaving behind a confusion of clues, a myriad of contradictory witness statements, and no solid answers. Their disappearance would create one of the largest hunts in Chicago history, and to this day, remains a haunting case which continues to remain in the minds of the family and investigators alike. On the morning of Friday, July 6, 2001, Tionda and Diamond were at the family's apartment. Their sisters, Rita, then 12, and Victoria, who would turn 9 the next day, were staying with a relative. According to Tracy, when she left for work that morning, the girls were going to be left home alone. Tionda would be responsible for looking after her younger sister, and it seems likely that this wasn't the first time she had been in this position. The timeline here can be subject to some debate, with Tracy having been reported to have left the apartment that morning at either 6 or 6:30 a.m., though the majority pinpoint this time as being closer to the latter. Either way, according to Tracy, when she left the apartment that morning, both Tionda and Diamond were home and sleeping. What occurred over the course of the next few hours is unknown. Tionda was scheduled to attend a summer program that day, though she never made it and was marked absent. What exactly was going to happen with Diamond during this time is unexplained. Perhaps she was going to accompany her sister to the program, though how the children would arrive there is also a piece of this puzzle which remains unclear. According to Tracy, she arrived home around 12:30 p.m. Again, this 12:30 time has been debated, with some saying that Tracy returned home as early as 11 a.m., but given some details from eyewitnesses, 12:30 seems to be the approximate time. An interesting detail about Tracy's return home is that she didn't arrive alone. She brought Diamond's father, George Washington, along with her, and according to her story, the two were planning to take the two girls on a camping trip. The trip was allegedly planned to take them down to Lake Schaefer in Indiana, approximately 2 hours and 110 miles to the south, though this has become a major subject of controversy and speculation. Tracy has openly stated that they'd never gone camping before, so why they suddenly decided to make this trip is unclear. Factor that in with the detail that the next day was Victoria's birthday, and many people find that this supposed camping trip doesn't exactly fit with the narrative. There's also been some speculation about Tracy and Washington's relationship at this point in time, with some believing they were romantically involved and others stating they were simply both involved with raising Diamond. Tracy stated that upon arriving home and finding the girls not there, she quickly discovered a note. The note, supposedly written by Tionda, explained that the two girls were going to be visiting a nearby store and then proceeding on to the Doolittle School, located approximately a block from the apartment, which itself was found at East 35th Street and Lake Park Avenue. It wasn't exactly out of the ordinary for the girls to visit the Doolittle School, as they were frequently enticed to play on the playground there, though how often these two young girls were prone to or allowed to wander there or anywhere else by themselves seems up for debate. Tracy then began searching for her children. If Tracy began this search as late as 1 p.m., she, at a minimum, waited 5.5 hours before calling the police and reporting the girls missing that evening at approximately 6:30 p.m. When the girls' great aunt, Sheila, later asked Tracy why she had waited so long to contact authorities, she confessed that she was afraid she'd be arrested. Sheila later said, quote, "Tracy was told by another member who had some previous run-ins with the DCFS that you should just look for them because if you call the police, DCFS, they're going to probably put you in jail or try to take your kids totally. So that's the explanation I got from Tracy personally as to why she changed her story." End quote. This would be one of many statements Sheila would make publicly over the years, and since that devastating day in July, Sheila would become the strongest advocate for both Tionda and Diamond. Police began questioning Tracy as well as all other family members. All told, they would interview and re-interview more than 30 relatives, but it was Tracy's story that they were having a hard time with. Initially, Tracy told police that she had been home taking a nap, and when she'd woken up, she'd found the girls missing. This story disrupted the early stages of the investigation as police had felt that had someone entered the home and abducted the girls, Tracy would have heard it. It wasn't until later that she told them she actually wasn't home, which changed the complexion of the investigation. When she told the police that Washington had been there with her that day, they found it odd that he elected to leave. The story became even stranger to them when Tracy confessed that Washington had actually spent the previous night at the apartment. While the two were engaged in a dispute over the question of his paternity, they were still engaging in some intimate encounters and had supposedly planned the aforementioned camping trip together. Due to the changing of her story, details which investigators found questionable, and what has been generally defined as an all-around lack of cooperation on the part of Tracy, she was quickly being pulled further and further under the microscope of their suspicion. In one particular incident, when an officer approached her to discuss potential leads in the case, this resulted in her shoving the officer and actually being cuffed and brought down to the station, though she was later released without charges. In the first 5 days of the investigation, Tracy was interviewed 4 times and not for short periods. On Saturday the 7th, the day after the disappearance, she was questioned for 8 hours. For the next few days, the interviews would continue with 6 hours on Sunday, 8 hours on Monday, and another 5 hours on Tuesday. It wasn't long before Tracy made the choice to hire a lawyer, Andre Grant, who was at the time fighting an unrelated wrongful prosecution case against the city of Chicago. Whether it was due to her lawyer's advice, her own frustration with the police focusing on her or some unknown reason, Tracy did take steps which made the investigation more difficult, according to investigators. Firstly, she wouldn't allow police to speak with her other daughters. She also refused to give a writing sample to investigators, which they were seeking in order to compare it to the note that had allegedly been written by Tionda. They will later acquire samples of Tionda's handwriting from her school, which would be studied by the FBI. Due to the perception of resistance, authorities requested that Tracy submit to a polygraph test, which she did. Tracy passed the polygraph, and while for some this helped dismiss some of the suspicion that had fallen over her, for others it did little to shift their perspective. Police managed to speak with Washington within the first few days of the investigation, and according to all reports, he agreed to meet with them and discuss the disappearance voluntarily. While the direct line of questioning to which he was subjected has never been revealed, authorities did request permission to search his home and vehicle. At the time, Washington drove a van, and when they swept it for evidence, they were able to recover several hairs. Forensic testing revealed that the hairs could have belonged to either girl or perhaps Tracy herself. A detective on the case later, when discussing the hairs, explained that while it was initially encouraging, the lack of clarification in terms of who the hair belonged to left them with little else they could do. Later in the investigation, the family found a voicemail message apparently left by Tionda on the morning of her disappearance. According to the statement, the voicemail said, quote, "Mama, this is Tionda. Mom, pick up the phone. George is at the door. Can I open the door? He said that we're going to Jules to pick up the cake there. We're going to pick you up from work." End quote. The voicemail raised a lot of questions, primarily who was the George that Tionda was referring to. There were two possibilities: George Washington and the other George, the man who lived in the building and sometimes babysat the girls. Initial suspicions pointed towards Washington, as authorities felt that mentioning the cake suggested the connection to Victoria's birthday. At the same time, this seemed to conflict with the story about taking the girls camping. Multiple family members have pointed out the fact that Tionda was very shy around people she didn't know, implying that it was more likely to have been George Washington, someone who wasn't around a great deal, whereas if it was their babysitter, Tionda may have been less likely to call about answering the door. The next development in the case came as the result of the voicemail. Officers went to the store known as Jules to examine surveillance footage from the day of the disappearance. On July 12th, they revealed that the footage showed two young girls fitting Tionda and Diamond's descriptions, but that they needed Tracy to come down and view the footage for verification. In a bizarre turn of events, which only lent to more suspicion, Tracy refused to view the tape. Tracy's lawyer, when asked about the tape, stated, quote, "My client is physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. There are a number of family members willing and able to view the tape at any time." End quote. The next day, Tracy showed up at a police precinct on the south side requesting to view the tape, an apparent change of heart from the previous day. However, by this time, the tape was in full possession of the FBI and was no longer available to the Chicago police. Ultimately, an arrangement was made for Tracy to meet with the FBI and view the tape. The investigation spanned far and wide, covering hundreds of interviews and thousands of record checks. Despite their sincerest efforts, detectives were never able to develop a lead solid enough to take them anywhere that might stop the case from growing cold. In the absence of investigative avenues, there came the scam artists. Over the years, 12 separate individuals have come forward claiming to be either Diamond or Tionda. However, in all cases, they were conclusively ruled out. Newly, within just the last week, another person has now come forward. Case update. A video recently surfaced on social media, specifically TikTok, which begins by showing a police car in a Texas parking lot and someone off camera says, "I'm here with Diamond Bradley." The camera operator then shows their phone, which has pulled up a picture of the Bradley's missing persons flyer. The camera then pans up to a young black female, at which point the person off camera says, "This is Diamond Bradley. Can I see your scar?" Seconds later, the camera zooms in on the woman's forehead to show a scar, though it's difficult to see any marks in the actual video. Diamond's great aunt, Sheila Bradley Smith, who has been the most driving and powerful force behind the push to locate the missing sisters all these years later, became aware of the video on Wednesday, May 17th. She then was contacted via Facebook Messenger by the woman in the video, at which point, according to Sheila, the caller told her that she had information about Diamond. When asked what that information was, the woman replied, "I am Diamond Bradley." According to Sheila, the two spoke on the phone for quite a while, during which time the woman claiming to be Diamond gave several details about her memories. Sheila explained, quote, "She pretty much said that she remembered being in a car and being around Tionda for a while, but then she said she was taken away and never saw her again." End quote. Nearly since the beginning, many members of the family have believed that the children were likely abducted by someone familiar to them, and several details of the disappearance simply didn't make sense to them. In an NBC interview in 2021, Sheila stated her belief that the girls had been abducted by someone they knew and that they had been coached to write the note that was left behind in the apartment. She explained, quote, "The person who took the girls was right there beside Tionda, telling her exactly what to write. She was being coached." End quote. The family agreed, saying that the grammar used in the letter was beyond Tionda's comprehension at the time, and that it was highly unusual for the girls to leave a note at all, instead opting to call their mother. The woman, who is now claiming to be Diamond, has not been named publicly, though it has been reported that she is based in Houston. Following the conversation, Sheila told the woman she needed to contact authorities, as she had dealt with scam artists in the past who claimed to be one of the missing girls, seeking out money, fame, or both. At that point, the woman was put into contact with the FBI, who obtained DNA samples from cheek swabs as well as fingerprints for comparison. As of this time, the DNA results have not been released, and thus the true identity of the woman cannot be known for certain. According to Sheila, this new claimant is the first person who claimed to be one of the missing girls who was actually excited to take a DNA test. As of now, the results of the test will determine what the next step is and whether or not this woman will become number 13 on the list of people who have claimed to be one of the girls. Aiming to temper her hope with restraint, Sheila posted on Facebook saying, quote, "Thank you to everyone that have sent messages, called, and texted regarding the TikTok video being circulated, and know that we are fully aware of the video. Due to the sensitivity of the matter, please allow time for the DNA results to be completed. Continue praying and hope for the best." End quote. I will continue monitoring news about the case, and when the results of the DNA test are released, I'll produce another update. I have my fingers crossed that maybe this time it will be different. Maybe there is some connection here. This family deserves to know what happened to Diamond and Tionda, to bring them home, to be reunited, and to see the person responsible for causing more than 20 years of grief and pain arrested and convicted for the atrocity they have committed. If you're looking for more information about the disappearance of Ilva Hagner, there are many news articles and websites discussing her case. I would highly recommend going back and listening to episode 179 if you haven't already for a thorough look at her disappearance. If you have any information about the disappearance of Ilva Hagner, please contact the Belmont Police Department at 650-595-7400. If you're looking for more information about the disappearance of Tionda and Diamond Bradley, there are many news sites, podcasts, and forums discussing their case. My coverage in episode 55 is as thorough as could be done at the time, but some new information has come to light since then. If you have any information about the disappearance of Tionda and Diamond Bradley, please contact the Chicago Police Department at 312-747-8366. You can also contact the Chicago Field Office of the FBI at 312-421-6700. What do you believe happened? Tweet me at TraceEvPod, email me at traceevidencepod@gmail.com, or comment in the Facebook group. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to thank our amazing Patreon producers: Alicia Lorraine, Andrew Guarino, Ann Bertram, Camelia Tyler, Christine Greco, Danny Renee, Daerthy, Denise Dingsdale, Diane Dyson, Eloanne Meyer, Fabulous TT, Guillermo Pinto, Jennifer Winkler, Julie A. Mangano, Justin Snyder, Kara Moreland, K.Y., Lars Jensen Fangel, Leslie B., Madison LaHoulier, Marla Wright, Melissa Breckeisen, Nick Mohar Shures, Sarah Lyons, Travis Skepko, Stacy Finnegan, Stephanie Joyner, Stephanie Eve, Tiffany Nelson, and Tom Radford. Without your amazing support, this show would not be possible, so thank you all so much for contributing to Trace Evidence. One quick reminder, if you're planning on attending CrimeCon this year in Orlando, Florida, use promo code TRACE at crimecon.com to save 10% off your pass. Once again, that's promo code TRACE at crimecon.com. If you're interested in learning more about this case or other cases featured on the show, please visit trace-evidence.com. There you can find case breakdowns, all social media links, merchandise shops, case descriptions, media, and options for donating, including PayPal and Patreon, should you wish to support the show. This concludes the updates for now, but hopefully we'll be getting additional information sooner than later. 2 cases, long unsolved, with new developments all inside of the past month. With fingers crossed, we hope for the best possible outcomes. I want to thank you again for listening, and I hope you'll join me next week for another unsolved case on the next episode of Trace Evidence.